Here's a number that should stop you in your tracks. 71%. That is Narendra Modi's approval rating heading into 2026, according to Morning Consult's global survey of 24 democratically elected leaders. For comparison, France's Emmanuel Macron sits at 15%, Germany's Friedrich Merz at 31%, the UK's Keir Starmer barely clears 30%. These are the leaders of the so-called Western world, and their own people have largely rejected them. Meanwhile, a man who grew up selling tea at a railway station in Gujarat commands the loyalty of nearly 1.4 billion people, and the respect of strategists from Washington to Tokyo. So the real question is, why? What has Modi done that other leaders haven't? And what does it tell us about where global power is heading? Let's get into it. To understand Modi's popularity, you first need to understand the world he's operating in. After the pandemic, Western governments went on a massive spending spree, betting that inflation would be temporary. That bet failed. Interest rates spiked. Mortgage costs in the UK doubled in 18 months. American consumer debt crossed $18 trillion for the first time ever. The result wasn't just economic pain, it was a collapse of trust, people looking at their leaders and seeing broken promises, deindustrialization, and political paralysis. Now look east. India in 2025 is growing at 6.6% GDP, more than double the global average. It became the fourth largest economy on Earth, and it's projected to add $7.3 trillion in GDP by 2030. That's the backdrop. A world losing faith in its old leaders, and one country rising faster than almost anyone predicted. The Western media often reduces Modi to one label: nationalist, strongman, polarizing figure, but that framing misses everything important. Modi was born in 1950 in a small town in Gujarat. His father ran a tea stall. Modi sold tea as a child. In a country where hundreds of millions of people earn less than $5 a day, that origin story isn't just biography, it's political currency. He's not a leader who talks about the poor, he's a leader who was poor. And that credibility cannot be manufactured. He spent years as a grassroots organizer before entering politics, learning India village by village. He became Chief Minister of Gujarat in 2001 and held that post for 13 consecutive years, building roads, attracting investment, stabilizing power supply. When he ran for Prime Minister in 2014, he wasn't selling ideology alone. He was selling a track record. So what has he actually done in 12 years at the national level? There are 5 things that explain the numbers. Pillar 1. Getting money directly to people. For decades, welfare money left the capital and got eaten up by corruption before it ever reached the poor. Up to 60 cents of every dollar lost to leakage. Modi's government dismantled that system. The solution? Link over 530 million bank accounts to a biometric ID and mobile connectivity, then wire benefits directly to people with no middlemen. The results are staggering. Free food grain for 800 million people. Over 30 million homes built for families who never had permanent shelter. Clean cooking gas delivered to 100 million households that previously cooked on open fire. That last one is why Modi's approval among women is 72%, higher than among men. When a woman no longer spends 4 hours a day collecting firewood, that's not a talking point. That's a life transformation. Pillar 2. Building things people can see. India's national highway network grew from 97,000 kilometers in 2014 to over 146,000 kilometers by 2025. Construction pace went from 12 kilometers per day to over 28 kilometers per day. New airports, metro systems, high-speed trains connecting cities that had never been on the national map before. When a farmer can now get his produce to market in 90 minutes instead of 6 hours, he doesn't need a think tank report to assess the government. He lived the before and the after. Pillar 3. Making India a manufacturing power. Modi launched Make in India in 2014 and backed it with over $26 billion in production incentives across 14 sectors. The results are showing up in the data. India's smartphone exports crossed $15 billion in 2024, up from near zero a decade ago. Apple now makes over 14% of its global iPhones in India. Micron Technology broke ground on India's first major semiconductor facility in 2024. Samsung, Foxconn, Tata Electronics, the global supply chain is physically relocating to Indian soil. When global corporations bet their supply chains on your country, it validates the government's entire economic thesis in front of every citizen watching it happen. Pillar 4. Playing the global game on India's own terms. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the West pressured India to join the sanctions. India said no. Instead, India bought Russian oil at a $20–30 discount, refined it, and sold it back to Europe, which was simultaneously sanctioning the same supply chain. India played both sides, legally, profitably. This is what's called strategic autonomy, and Modi made it a doctrine. India is in the Quad with America, Japan, and Australia. It also deepens trade with China. It partners with France on defense while buying Russian equipment. It hosted the G20 in 2023 and positioned itself not as a developing nation seeking approval, but as a pivot point between the global South and the West. For Indian voters, after 200 years of colonialism, watching their country play on equal terms with the world's most powerful nations carries enormous emotional weight. Pillar 5. Personal credibility. In an age of institutional distrust, personal brand matters. Modi is visibly austere. No dynastic family. No obvious personal wealth accumulation. He communicates monthly on radio in plain Hindi to hundreds of millions of listeners, including rural communities with no internet access. And every image of Modi standing alongside the most powerful leaders on earth sends one message home. Your country has arrived, and I brought it here. Now, this analysis would be dishonest without the counter-argument. There are legitimate concerns. Media consolidation. Critics say large parts of Indian media have shifted toward alignment with the government. Press freedom indices rank India poorly. Legal scholars have raised questions about judicial independence. Economic inequality remains real. India's GDP is booming, but the gains haven't reached everyone equally. And the regional gap is stark. 86% approval in northern India, just 32% in the south. These are documented concerns, not fringe allegations. But here's the analytical reality. These concerns explain why Modi's popularity isn't universal. They don't explain why it remains structurally dominant. The populations that experience the most direct improvements in their daily lives, rural households, women, working-class communities, are the populations registering the highest approval scores. And in India's democratic arithmetic, that group is enormous. The IMF, World Bank, Moody's, S&P, every major forecasting institution has revised India upward while revising almost every other major economy down. India is projected to overtake Japan and become the third largest economy on Earth by 2027 or 2028. It is the only G20 economy projected to sustain above 6% growth through the rest of this decade. And here's what makes it durable. The infrastructure can't be undone. The welfare system can't be politically repealed without electoral catastrophe. The Apple, Micron, and Samsung investments are locked into 10 to 20-year capital cycles. Whoever leads India next, from whatever party, will inherit a country that is already a global superpower in the making. That is Modi's most significant legacy. He didn't just win elections, he built structures that outlast elections. We started with one number, 71%, the highest democratic approval rating on Earth. Now you know why. It's not accidental. It's the output of 12 years of hard structural choices, welfare delivery that actually reached people, infrastructure built at unprecedented pace, manufacturing investment that generated real jobs, and a foreign policy that made India feared and respected. While Western leaders were managing short-term crises, India was building long-term foundations. The global order hasn't just started shifting, it has already shifted. The question now isn't whether India is rising. The question is, are you paying attention? If this gave you a new angle on the global picture, subscribe and hit the bell. The next video goes deeper into India's economic architecture, the sectors, the trade corridors, and what it all means for the next decade. Stay sharp, stay strategic.